do we miss home? Absolutely. Is there a wish that we could just go down to the beach and ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi over there and just crack a musubi open? Absolutely.
When I was pregnant, I had so much anxiety about having a Kanaka kid and being like, I'm navigating all this stuff. How am I supposed to do this? Like, and how am I just bringing her into a situation that she's going to feel the same way I do?
Because there's a lot of keiki and opio who are now born here. That's it. And they're the first generation. And hearing it from a person who's the third generation, I think will matter to them. Hey, aloha mai kākou. Welcome back to our second episode of Kahena o Keʻola or KOKO podcast here at Kalo's Aloha Resource and Community Center. Today we're very excited to share this kuka with our guest today, and I'm just going to hand it over so that Nohea, she's one of our members here at Kalo. She is also a Mākua here in Oregon, and we wanted to welcome her today. So if you can go ahead and just introduce yourself.
Yeah, aloha. Mahalo for having me. It's such an honor to get to be here, and so cool you guys are having this podcast and space for us. But yeah, my name's Noheaililani, Waiwaiʻole, and I was born in Portland, and then raised some in Hilo, and recent Kalo member, and I recently joined the halau, and I'm a parent of a almost 2-year-old Kaʻula Pili. She turns 2 actually next Saturday. So.
Oh, next Saturday, the 10th?
On Mother's Day.
Oh my!
Yeah.
She's just, Kaʻula is such a joy. Well, mahalo for being here. I guess our intro is a little bit, there's a lot to talk about. So, a little bit, for me, I was very honored to meet you as well. Having moved here from Hawaii, I actually hadn't met too many people who have a multi-generations who moved here from Hawaii, and were born and raised here. And so I think this is very exciting because a lot of our conversations that we have is really about living in the diaspora or being displaced. But I think your narrative is a little bit different just because there's a longer history and there's a longer relationship you folks have here on the continent than many of the people I've spoken to. Even if we have, if we have kupuna who have been living here for 40 plus years, they were born and raised in Hawaii. And so that narrative is so different. So I'm really excited to be able to share that conversation with you. I know I don't think we've had much time to really talk about it. I've always been very interested in hearing that story. I think the first time was when you joined us for Papaololo Kahi's Healo. And I think a lot of the people in that room also were surprised because not a lot of us get to meet Kanaka who have been here and who have a pilina with this aina as well. So I guess, if you could just kind of share with us your story, like where does your family come from? When did you folks move up to the continent and kind of, take us through that journey?
Yeah, okay. So it's kind of a long story. And I just want to say too, like, I think it's multi-generational, and this is just like my mana'o and my perspective, and there's other people in my ʻohana who might have different mana'o, and that's okay. So I'm actually the third generation to be born on the continent, and my first like kupuna who really left home and kind of was the first to navigate being in the diaspora and being displaced was my great-grandfather. So he was born and raised Pearl City, and he joined the Merchant Marines when he was, I think, like in his 20s probably, so pretty young still. And he was born during that, that transition from the kind of shortly after the overthrow and then the territory days and then statehood and such a heavy time, So he joined the Merchant Marines, and he did a lot of different things, but he never really went back home, is my understanding, after he left. So I think, and that's something I'm still trying to learn more about. Like, I think I always saw our mo'olelo as starting with, like, my grandfather who was the first one born over here, but I think more recently, in digging more into, you know, like our mo'okua hau and stuff, I'm seeing the other, how it goes back farther and the other, like, connections with other kupuna that we have, and just, the impacts of kind of navigating the diaspora and what does that mean. So my great-grandfather, he eventually met my great-grandmother, and they had my grandfather. He was born and raised in San Francisco. So he was the first one to be actually born away. And it's a little bit hard to talk about, and I think I'm still trying to, I don't know, figure out the best way to talk about it that's doing right by everyone in my ohana. And it's still kind of unfolding, I think, too. But so my great-grandfather was in the Merchant Marine, so he left and came back a lot. And after my grandfather was still really little, he was only about 2, he wasn't really raised with his father. So that's really heavy, and it's kind of hard to talk about. And my great-grandfather, kind of later on, after he was Paul with the Merchant Marines, his ohana was all musicians, and so they all traveled around the continent performing, and with, like, hula halaus and stuff like that. So, which that was always really interesting to me, too, trying to picture what that would have been like for him during that time, you know, like, and going through the continental U.S. during, you know, like, still a lot of segregation and so much racism, and to be mostly performing for haules. Like, it's not like they were going around performing for Hawaiians. So that's kind of something that I'm still trying to learn more about, too, and just what that would have been like for them. And there's actually this book, sorry, this might not go on the podcast, but there's this book that someone just told me about that. I was actually thinking about you. Maybe you've already read it, but have you heard of Aloha America?
No.
It's like this book about this whole, I guess there's tons of Kanaka that did this, like, all throughout.
There are. Yeah.
Which I didn't know that. Like, I think I thought, like, oh, why was my ohana doing all this? But this was, like, part of this bigger history of our people.
It's a huge, it's very huge.
Yeah.
To lean on that for you, if you ever, Leialoha, who's also Hawaiian Civic Club in Chicago, they actually have a museum.
Oh, wow.
So they're building this narrative. So to go with your story, like, my grandfather's cousin was a musician who also did that. So that's why when you shared that, I'm like, oh, that's so crazy. But yeah, they had his picture is still up at one of the restaurants in Chicago.
Oh, wow.
And he ended up having, like, a permanent spot. It was like every Saturday night was like Hawaiian night or something. Yeah. So that narrative is everywhere. Because another person who also shares their story about their grandmother doing that, sharing Hawaiian music, is Amy Hanaili. Her grandmother was in New York and is known for, like, bringing Hawaiian music and that I think that's kind of during that Hapa Haole era as well, where, like, that music really traveled through the continent. Awesome. I love that. Aloha America. I have to look into that.
You should. It's really interesting, and it's mostly focused on more hula, but obviously the musicians were there with the halaus and stuff. And
very cool.
It's kind of looking too at, like, the relationship between, I think the book is very political, and, like, looking at the relationship between the U.S. and Hawaii at that time, and how all of these mo'olelo are part of that bigger relationship, and, like, imperial, and everything that was happening with the transition from territory to statehood, things like that. So
very cool.
Anyway, so that's kind of some about my great-grandfather. And so he, my grandpa was not very connected with him. He was around when he was little, and then there's a few different, like, kind of key moments in mo'olelo throughout my grandfather's life that he did get to kind of be with him. But because he was not connected to, you know, his father, not only did he have that loss, but then also that's how, like, he wasn't connected to the rest of his ohana through, that would have been his act, because he was on the diaspora, right? And it's not like he was back home where, oh, your father's not there, maybe there's other ohana that can help fill in those gaps. It was a very different experience for him, being in the diaspora and just having there wasn't, you know what I mean, to fill that stuff in. So he traveled a lot. My grandfather traveled a lot the whole time, like all kind of up and down the Pacific Northwest the whole time that he was being raised. So he wasn't really in a place long enough really to put down other roots, or maybe even to connect with other Hawaiians outside of his sister. It was him and his sister, my Auntie Helani. So yeah, he didn't, there's that separation, between him and his father, which is really heavy, and then also between the rest of his ʻohana, that's how, you know, things get passed down, and how we make sense of ourselves and our identity and our culture, and he just didn't have access to those things.
And, you know, I love that you bring that up, because I think that's something that a lot of our Kanaka need to understand in Hawaii. You know, we kind of leaned in with Auntie Louise and I in our last episode, like, that conversation of, like, feeling enough. And I think this is the pieces that our Kanaka who are at home, they don't get to hear, right? Like, during that time when that transition of Hawaii, you know, trying to figure, and I've had this conversation with other Hawaii people as well who live up here, trying to navigate where they belong, like how to survive during that transition. I think we missed that conversation. And like people are so surprised, like, oh, what do you mean you don't know who your ʻohana is? Well, how about we step back and take the time to understand that a lot of our Kanaka or our families who are living away, they don't have the access that many who are in Hawaii did, because unfortunately, not by their choice, it was a choice made prior to them, that they decided that the best opportunity would be to leave, to Hawaii. And I think we really have to elevate that, what you're just saying. Like, so many of our Hawaiians are on this journey, like your grandpa was, or like maybe you folks are, right? Like a journey to connect all those pieces that just never exist, because we are such an oral community where like our history, our stories get passed down, and when you don't have access to that, it's no fault to anybody. Like, I think we have to, so I love that you bring that up. I think a lot of Kanaka on the continent need to hear that. Like, they need to be able to hear, like, it's okay. Like, you just gotta keep doing your journey. But sorry, I didn't mean to jump in there. But go ahead, continue. I love that you share that. Yeah,
it's true, because I think it's so easy to internalize that, and then that's where shame, you know what I mean? Like, all these things that I think it is powerful to say, like, yeah, it's not our fault, or it wasn't my grandpa's fault, or you know, like, that's just the different situations that we found ourselves in. So my grandpa, he didn't go back home for the first time until he was probably around 20, and it was only because he got drafted to the Vietnam War, and for R&R restoration, he got to go Oahu. And so he'd only told me the story recently, but he said that his ʻohana all came and picked him up from the airport, took him to the house, celebrate Thanksgiving, which is kind of funny. And then, you know, just, I think that was the maybe first and only time that he actually met a lot of his ʻohana over there.
Wow.
And he had a sister, like a half sister, who was living over there, that he was around some when they were growing up. And he told me that his sister and his brother-in-law, they took him to the Polynesian Cultural Center, and they said, this is how you can get for the most bang for your buck, like, see the things that you've been missing out on in terms of your culture. And took him out to eat lots of places, I think, too. And but that was my grandfather's first time being back home. So that, I know that's, even just that is such a different experience than most of our people have in terms of being raised.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, so my grandfather, he ended up actually in Forest Grove, so home of Pacific, and that's where he met my grandmother, and then they had my dad and my Auntie Kulia. And so they stayed in Forest Grove the whole time, so they were born and raised there. And that was the only time that was like a big Pacific University, because there's so many people from Hawaii who go to school over there and stuff. That became a really big access point for them, just that is not something really like that my grandpa had when he was growing up in the same way. So like they would go to the luau and the hoike, and I think some got some you know, access to different cultural stuff through that. And then my dad got to go to Pacific, and I think that really changed a lot of things for our whole ʻohana. And he only got to go because my grandma worked there, so he got free tuition.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Otherwise, I don't think he would have gone. But that was the first time he was around other Hawaiians, and that was the first time, like, that anyone in our ʻohana was around other Hawaiians in that way, besides when my grandpa would get to see his ʻohana. So I think that was the first time that my dad was getting to, like, face-to-face with these questions of, like, what does it mean to be Hawaiian? What does it mean to be Hawaiian from the diaspora who's never been back home? He's never gone at this point still. So, yeah, just kind of these big questions that you can't really... I think what I'm learning, too, through my own journey is, like, you can't answer those questions by yourself. Yeah, like, it takes community, and it's so much of our identity is co-created in terms of how we view ourselves and all those things. So that's kind of the first time that he's getting access to that stuff and getting to figure that out and building pilina with other Hawaiians. And he became pretty close with a lot of the other Hawaiians there, ended up living with all of them, and, like, I think that is something that really changed, like, his life and all of our kind of lives, just getting to have that experience. And so kind of a cool story from that time is one of his classmates at Pacific was part of the ʻohana, the Trask ʻohana. And so they brought over, and he was at Pacific late 80s, early 90s, so, like, kind of during a big time for us with the Hawaiian sovereignty movement. All this stuff. So they brought over, like, these pamphlets of, like, information and, like, propaganda about the Hawaiian sovereignty movement. Nice. And, like, a VHS, like, a videotape and all this stuff. And I think that's something that really, that he took and that really changed my dad was always, he's still like this, like, he teaches history. And so I think for him, and my grandpa, too, in a sense, I think, like, a way that he could connect before Pacific and growing up was through reading different books and history books about, like, Hawaii and things like that. But I'm sure all of that stuff was written by, like, Haules and was not. So I think for him, and I'm sure for a lot of Hawaiians, like, I think it was so powerful for him to get to have those mo'olelos from, like, our own point of view and our own perspective as Hawaiians, and, like, understand what happened to us and how that has impacted him, maybe, or just, like, how he's still involved in all of that. So that was something that he kind of took all that information and shared it with the rest of our ʻohana. And then my grandfather's sister, my Auntie Leialoha, she was also kind of on that journey during that time with all the sovereignty movement stuff. And so she really took to that as well. And she was actually the first one of our little, like, clan that moved back home. So and I think that was how she kind of found her sense of kuleana to move back home, and to make that journey was through just trying to go and help whoever she could with whatever different organizing was happening at that time around the sovereignty stuff. She kind of just, like, dedicated herself to that, and that was how she, met people and built pilina, and actually was the first of us to go back home. Beautiful. And something else that happened during that time, I think this was maybe a little bit after my dad was in college, was someone else, I think also from the Trask ʻohana, I don't remember exactly who, but came to the Portland Convention Center and was giving a talk for, I don't think they used the word diaspora, I think mainland Hawaiians. And my dad went and my Auntie Leialoha went, and he would always tell me this when I was growing up, but the talk was basically, or his interpretation of it was, like, just because you moved away, you're still Hawaiian, and we still need you to be Hawaiian. And you still, like, have kuleana and need to be part of this movement that we're all on together. And they actually talked about KOKO, and they said, like, if you have blood, then you're Hawaiian. And I think that was something that also really helped, just having someone say that and him getting to hear someone say that in terms of how he's trying to make sense of his own identity as a diaspora Hawaiian who still has not been home at this point and was raised away and raised mostly outside of his culture. Like, I think that was really powerful and really shaped the way he saw himself and the way that he saw us when we were growing up too, also in the diaspora. And a lot of times when questions about, what does this mean or how all that kind of stuff, he would go back to that mana'o that got shared with him. So now it's after my dad's been in college, my auntie Heileani is living home, and then my auntie Kulia is actually the first, my dad's sister, who got to go back home and visit because my auntie Heileani was living there. And I think that was really big for us as an ʻohana, just because she got to, like, at this point we were pretty disconnected from our ʻohana that was still living over there, which is something I've talked to other, I think that's part of what happens with displacement, and everyone getting spread out across the continent, and you don't have that pilina even with your own ʻohana anymore to go back, and maybe just the way that can cause a barrier for people to even return back home of, like, who are you going to stay with, or who's who's going to claim you. So she had this access through my auntie Heileani, who was there, to get to go back. And I think what was really important about that trip for her, and from, again, stories that she would always tell me about that, is, like, just getting to understand, like, certain ways of just how to show up, and, like, how to bring makana, or, like, how to, like, different protocols, just things like that she got to, like, experience and kind of get to, and start to build that pilina with other Hawaiians, and, like, with Aina, and just, that was, like, a really important time for her to get to go and do that. And she was probably in her early 20s, so that's the first time she's going home.
That connection piece is that's important. And I think that's a huge barrier for a lot of our poʻe Hawaiʻi who want to go home. That's, and I never thought of it that, like, who will claim you? Like, how do you... Sorry, I'm absorbing all of the
I feel like
things.
That so much of being Hawaiian is just So she just is getting back from that trip, and she's telling my dad about it. And at this point, we're living on the Oregon coast, and it's a small town, and there's, like, one other Hawaiian family that we're close with in the town. And my dad's driving me, like, really far to go to Halau, but it's like hula nutcracker. Like, I think we stopped going pretty quick.
I never heard it like that. Hula nutcracker.
He quickly realized, like, oh, I don't know how legit this is. But, like, that's, to me, I like that story because it's, like, he's trying so hard to, like, what's anything that I can get her access to.
And to bring you guys that pilina. That pilina to home, Yep.
And so my auntie just comes back. She's telling him all about this trip, and she actually told me that at that point he was saying he didn't know if he'd ever go back home.
Oh, wow.
Because I think he felt like he had this window at Pacific, and then that time kind of passed. And I feel like he told me when he was at Pacific, he felt like he was two different people. Or, like, I think it's that assimilation, and it's that you grow up in assimilation, and then you're like, oh, and then you go back to it, and you're like, well, when you don't have access to your people and your culture. And I think he told me too that he was really worried about going back home in the right way. He didn't want to go as a tourist, and he didn't want to go as a visitor. He wanted to have a reason he was there, and he wanted to be invited. And he just felt like that was really important, and he didn't want to, and I totally understand that. Like, he didn't want to go and people just be like, oh, what are you doing here, or whatever. So my auntie's able to tell him about her and share her experience with him and be like, no, you have to go. Like, it'll be great. It was, like, so impactful for her, and all of the mo'olelo from that story and stuff like that. So I think somewhere along the way, like, the seed gets planted, and my dad takes that and is like, oh, what if we just moved back? Which, to me, I don't even know. It's amazing to me that seed, like, turned into what it did, just given where he was coming from, and, like, what, I just so mahalo him for doing that, because I can't imagine how hard it was. He describes it as stepping off the edge of a cliff, and he just didn't know where he was going to land, or how he would be received, or what was going to happen. So him, me, my grandfather, and my auntie Kulia, we all go visit Oahu and Molokai, and that's the first time I'm getting to go, and I'm, like, maybe 3, so I'm already having this totally different pilina, right? Yeah. And at this totally different starting point than my father or my grandfather or my auntie. So we go kind of check it out, and then my grandfather decides he's going to come with us too, and so they start applying for jobs, and they get hired at the Kamehameha, the new campus that's opening in Keʻau the first year. So that's how we ended up in Hilo.
Mm-hmm.
It's just because of the jobs. So we moved back, and they enrolled me in Hawaiian immersion school at Kaʻula. Yeah, and my dad teaches at Kamehameha for a year, and then actually ends up leaving and not teaching, but working at Kaʻula. And I get to go be in halau over there, and it's not hula nutcracker.
Nope.
And yeah, it's kind of like we have access to all these things for the first time, right? Like generationally, of like we're able to, you know, like all those questions and kind of start figuring all this stuff out. And it's not that it wasn't hard. Like I know it was challenging, but it's like we're there. Yeah, like it's just a different level of access, that there weren't civic clubs or all these different kind of spaces. I mean, I know there's like probably halaus, but it's probably kind of few and far between at that point. So anyway, so we're living there. My grandparents are living there. My Auntie Kulia is working on like moving back too. And then I'm the hiapo of 3 at this time. Mm-hmm. And then my mom accidentally gets pregnant, and it's with triplets. So in Hawaii Island, there's only 2 incubators at the time. There wasn't a NICU. And so they tell her, you have to relocate Oahu. Like, you can't have the babies here. Mm-hmm. And my parents, like, I really believe, and I'm sure this is true of so many of our ʻohana who had to leave. Like, they tried everything they could to stay. Mm-hmm. I think especially because they knew what it was like to go. Like, we'd already been living that. And so, yeah, they tried everything they could to stay. I really believe that. And they couldn't, they're already kind of struggling to make ends meet in Hilo. Oahu's so much more expensive. Yeah. My mom would have had to be over there for like a year, like with the bed rest and like it's kind of a big deal with the triplets at that time. Mm-hmm. So anyways, we end up moving back to Oregon, to Forest Grove. And I think that was such a big, I think our ʻohana we're still realizing like how traumatic that was, of just going from, you know, it's all the same longing, and it's all the same, like just something that you don't have for so long, and then you kind of have it, and you're there, and you're kind of figuring out what this means, and then you just don't have it again. My dad told me, and especially for my dad, I think, because he was born and raised in Forest Grove, and then he's back. And my dad's name is Poeko. And he said all his life it got shortened to Po, and my auntie's name got shortened to Leah. And he said it was his first day at work. He's working at the same high school that he like went to. A lot of his coworkers are folks that he went to school with. It's kind of small town. And he said, like, I think for all of us, there were things that we tried to hold on to, and ways that we were trying to, you know, show up differently after having those experiences. And he was taking, like, relearning Leialoha Hawaiian too, and all this stuff, and, like, on his own kind of journey. But anyways, it's his first day at work. He goes to introduce himself to someone. He goes, oh, yeah, my name's Poeko. And someone that he had gone to school with all his life, like, was also there and said, oh, you don't have to call him that. He's not really Hawaiian like that. Just call him Po. And he said that just a random haole guy. But, like, I think that kind of, you know, it's that assimilation, and that when you don't, I just don't know, like, for us, like, what else. I think we tried everything we could do to make that transition and still stay connected. And it was really hard. And there wasn't this, like, the first time my dad came here, he was like, oh, this would have been nice to have in 2005. Yeah, just get off the plane from Hilo and then come plug in here. But, like, that kind of stuff to us, it didn't exist. And I know that there's been halau, and there's been other ʻohana and other Hawaiians and, like, people, because I think you came here in a similar timeline even than we did. Like, folks who were fighting to build all these spaces and who've been doing this work for decades. And I don't want to act like that wasn't here. But, like, for us, it felt like it wasn't. It wasn't something that we had access to. Yeah. And I think we just, just kind of went back to assimilating, which is really hard. Like, there's so much shame in that, and it's hard to talk about.
It is. The Inoa thing, we gotta talk about this Inoa thing. You know, even to this day, people still do that. Like, oh no, you don't have to. You don't have to say. And I think probably while he was growing up, prior to moving to Hilo, or moving back home, you know, the conversations of the importance of Inoa isn't had up here. You don't hear it. Like, when people, for example, right, people know me as Lei, but my name is actually Leialoha Keanuenue, which is the whole, right? And for me, at home, it was never, if I had to say my whole name, I had no problem. And it wasn't until I came here, when I went to school, and they have to do roll, because I don't know if they still do roll like that, but back in the day when I went to school, they had to say your name. And when I went to WSU, I would always know it was me before they even got to lay. Like, there was like a pause, and they'd try to do it. And I'd be like, oh, it's me, I'm here. And like, they wouldn't even question. And I think that's the assimilation part. Like, even for having grown up in Hawaii, understanding the importance of our Inoa, I did the same. Like, I led to that, and I just didn't want them to, for lack of better, I didn't want them to butcher my name. I just didn't want them. And I think for us who have Inoa Hawaiʻi, I think we tend to lean on that. Like, I would prefer you not to say my name, but the reality is, like, no, we need to. People need to say your dad's name, or else the narrative is like, oh, you guys don't have to say it like that. He's not that kind. No, we are. We are for Hawaiians, and I think this probably would be another great podcast. Inoa is so waiwai. It's so important, because our Inoa is the link to our ʻohana, and when you can find that journey in your name, it tends to lead you back to where your family is from, and that's why, like, at home, right, like, the biggest questions is like, where are you from, right? And when they ask you, like, where are you from, like, and your name is Nohea, and so it's so interesting, like, in Olala Hawaii, right, when Noheaililani, like, when the question of Noheaililani isn't necessarily like, oh, I'm from Beaverton. No. I'm asking you, like, where is your ʻohana from? Like, where do you hail from? And so Inoa is so important. So when we have indigenous names, I think people need to check themselves before they create this narrative that's like, oh, it's, we'll just make it easier for other people. Because we all, and us who have indigenous, like, our names that are of Hawaiian, like, we should hold strong and say our name, even though, like, for now, like, I go by Leialoha. Like, I don't bring my Hawaiian name out unless, for me, it's just a sense of, like, kuleana to the Inoa. Like, I will not use my whole Hawaiian name unless it's needed.
Yeah.
Because there's a reason why I was named that. There's a kuleana that comes with that Inoa. And I can tell you, when I was 20, I didn't know what that kuleana is. I know it more importantly now. So, shame on that person who said that about your dad's name.
Yeah.
But I'm glad he was like, no, this is my Inoa. So now, and you got to go to Hawaiian Immersion School. What was that like? I would love to, like, hear about that, because it's so amazing to hear. Like, I grew up in Hawaii, and for me, I don't know if I've ever shared this to you, but it took a long time for me to get in Hawaiian Immersion School.
Oh, really?
I didn't go to Hawaiian Immersion School from when I was younger. I started Hawaiian Immersion School in 7th grade.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I was the first English-speaking student they took outside of elementary school.
Oh, wow.
That was the very first one. I think since me, we've had just a few more, but that's that's not common. Because to absorb Olala Hawaiʻi, you have to be a lot younger, right? To really, like, so it took a lot. It was very challenging. And I think I started trying to get into the school at 4th grade. Like, every year, and meeting, like, with the administration there, and then I had to go to Puna. I worked in the summer as a young kid, volunteered every time at Puna Leo, so that I could learn the language, so that they could accept me into Hawaiian Immersion School. But what was it like coming from here like this system, and then going that
and then going back.
Like how does that?
So I started over there in first grade, and I was like, I immediately was like, I'm a year late. Like, I should have started in kindergarten with everyone else. And it was hard. Yeah, I mean, I think I was really young, but my dad would always tell me, like, this is important. Like, we are Hawaiian. Like, this is really important that you're doing this. And it's a big kuleana. And I just kind of, I think even though I didn't get it, like, I kind of got it, and that's what helped me maybe like get through it. But yeah, it was definitely hard. I mean, I definitely got teased a lot for being hale and, you know, malihini, all that kind of stuff, which like I totally understand. I think at the time I was a little bit confused because I was like racializing it of like, there's other people in our class who are blonde hair, blue eyes, like why am I the one? And I was like, like I don't speak pidgin, you know what I mean, like all these things, like I'm coming from a totally different place and I am an outsider, and like I get that a lot more now. But yeah, it was hard, and it was hard and it was good. I don't know, I mean, like I really took to, I was still pretty young, so I really took to Leialoha Hawaiʻi, and I was fluent, and which is weird to think about now because I kind of immediately lost it when we left, so that was also
there's
really
no access point for you.
And I remember when we so I go from going to school in Keokaha to then going to the small like kind of school in Portugal, all hale in the whole school pretty much. And I remember like I think there's just different, I kind of remember being a little, I mean I was still pretty little, but being like this is something I'm gonna hold on to, and like I'm still Hawaiian and all this stuff. And I mean it's just that was obviously not, I couldn't speak Leialoha Hawaiʻi at my new school. That was not popular. And even this is like a small thing, but I always remember this, but like I remember going the first day and I got in trouble, like you weren't allowed to wear open-toed shoes. And I remember being like, I can't even wear slippers, like so yeah, I think it was really, that was a really hard loss to like lose the language in that way and just not have other people to like I think my dad tried a little bit because he had been learning as an adult, and so he actually I think held on to more of it since he was learning from that context versus just being immersed to it, and you're just but when you're not, I think that's what's interesting too is like I feel like especially with so many of our people being displaced more recently, like I feel like there's like, because it's kind of hard to sift through this whole mo'olelo with my ʻohana and like what are the like lessons and like the ha'awina and stuff like that. But I feel like we got to experience like what it's like, which I know other people are experiencing this now, and like the generational impacts in a way that for folks who are maybe, and I get it, it's totally different for folks who are coming out here more recently versus like for us because of, I mean, there's differences, but I also think there's similarities, and there's, just experiencing the impacts of what it's like to not have access to your culture and to have your ʻohana system be disrupted, and like all these things, like versus what it looks like to have access to those things, and how that's so much different, and how that impacts everything about us in terms of our health and our relationships and just everything. So I think
one, on behalf of our Kaiapuni students, I apologize
it's okay.
for that. You need to have an apologies, Kaiapuni students. We shouldn't be treating anybody like that, and I too, I didn't realize that until I came here, how I acted. So on behalf of us, e kalamai for that. We should be doing better. I can't say that we are yet, but we need to be doing better. And then too, I think, yes, there are a lot of Kanaka who are needing to be uprooted and coming here, having been in Hawaiian immersion, and I've met a lot of families who their ʻohana their kids were in Hawaiian immersion school and then having to move here. But it's a very unique position where you're in, where you were here with the lack of access. And then you go back to being like, oh my gosh, like, this is what it is, and then having to have that stripped away again, that's like, bless your ʻohana, man, because that is a roller coaster that you folks, I have no words for. That is a journey that I can't even imagine, like, how you folks are navigating. That is amazing. And I think, again, this conversation is so important because there's a lot of keiki and opio who are now born here. That's it. And they're the first generation. And hearing it from a person who's the third generation, I think will matter to them, especially because so many of them, that identity crisis piece is really hard.
Yeah.
I have, it's just with my own children, right?
Yeah.
Like, they all have different personalities, different characteristics, different features. And, the one who was born here in Oregon has a very, his character, or his he looks very Hawaiian, very Hawaiian, right? He does, yeah. And so he struggles with that because it's like, but he also has a connection here, and it's like, how do I navigate? And so I think having more of these conversations and letting opio and keiki know that there is a way to navigate, and it's okay to feel however you're feeling. I think one of the biggest things, and it's interesting that you folks moved back in 2005. That's when I also came here.
Yeah.
So that is so, I'm like...
I know, I think I remember putting that together and being like, oh.
Our kupuna work in very mysterious ways, I'm telling you. It's just the way that it goes. But when I came here in 2005, I had no intention on staying. I always wanted to go home. And I hadn't, so 2006 I went home, and I didn't go home again until 2008. So it's like 2 years I didn't go home. And I was like in this, like, I'm gonna go home, all yada yada, all the things, right? And then it wasn't until I went home when I realized, well, my kuleana was gonna be here. And the realization of, like, the things that were missing, and how can, I think, being very privileged to have gone to Hawaiian immersion school, growing up in Halau, and bringing that over here, because we wanna try to correct the hula nut crackers. We want to be able to give pinina, right? And I think just leaning into that, I mean, I think we'll go into, like, I think there's a different, I think Kaʻula is going to be growing in a very different Oregon environment.
Yeah.
I think what's been created is that for decades upon decades of conversations, assimilation, barriers, identity crisis, all of that, we're in a space now where the next generation doesn't have to grow up with those barriers. Do we miss home? Absolutely. Is there a wish that we could just go down to the beach and ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi over there and just crack a musubi open? Absolutely. But I think hearing your stories, and this also, I also want to elevate this into, like, our people at home need to hear these. Because till today, so many of our Hawaiians still have this shame as if they aren't enough. Like, and the thing about it is, I think if we extend a hand versus pointing a finger, the narrative will be different. And it goes to, and I think I say this too often, but I have to continue. Culture heals. Like, if we can lean on our culture and lean on to the practices of our kupuna, instead of thinking that we know the answer, we sometimes have to step back and understand, like, your great grandfather, what was his narrative? My great grandpa, like, my grandpa flies the American flag, and for me, I'm like, ooh, like, where's the Hawaiian flag too? You know what I mean? But we don't know that narrative. We weren't there in that time. We are the people trying to put the pieces together.
I have a sibling who lives in New Jersey, and then I have a sister who is at Eastern Oregon for college. Okay. She'll be back soon. And then the triplets. 2 girls and a boy.
So the one that lives in New Jersey, we're working on starting a civic club.
Oh,
So Halo is there. So
yes,
yeah,
I tried
so
telling them about that.
Yeah, he's awesome. And so we're connected just through Hawaiian immersion schools and stuff
That's
like
good
that.
to know.
So Olelo Hawaii, for you folks coming back here, just there was no access.
No.
So for your younger siblings to even have any sort of pilina to Hawaii wasn't really made. There wasn't very much for them, I would imagine.
No, I think mostly just through our own ʻohana and then maybe just mo'olelo. But like, yeah, it's just totally different because even my sister and my sibling who were over there with me, they were really young, so they don't remember much.
Yeah. And see, that's a big thing, like, even for us, like, and I think, like, when I started halal, we started halal in 2008. It wasn't until 2012. It was our first trip to take people home. And for some of them, that was the first time that they went to Hawaii. Actually, for a lot of our halal trips, it's the first time.
Like for the OPO or?
For anybody, for people who, anybody who's in the halal, like, it would be their first trip. But it was for the OPO, a lot of them. Our narrative is a little bit different because we went home for family or for, just to stay connected. But it was 2012 when I realized, like, we have to make access for our OPO to go home.
Yeah.
Even now, I think it's still important for anybody with pinina to Hawaii to put your feet in the sand. Outside of your ʻohana, how do your siblings stay connected to Hawaii?
I think the biggest access point for them and for myself and all of us too, once we left in 2005, was our ʻohana, who when we were over there pretty much just hanaʻi'd us, like, and that we still, it was so I had a classmate, I guess I'll shout them out. I don't know. But I had a classmate, Hali'a, who was the same year as me at Kaʻula, and then her dad was the principal at the school, my uncle Alapaki, and then her mom my auntie Kahele was worked at the school too. So they all met, me and Hali'a were classmates, and then they all met my dad, and they had never heard a story like, I mean, a lot of people had never heard a story like my dad. So unique, like, where, what's your name? Where do you come from? And just the whole thing. So, my dad ended up being really close with my uncle now, and that was kind of the first friend that I made at Kaʻula too. Was I call her my cousin now, Hali'a. And then so when we left, we stayed really connected with them, and they've always just treated us like ʻohana and always have welcomed us. And every time I would go back home, like, they'd always come pick us up at the airport and say welcome home, and just all those like little things that make a really big difference of like people claiming you, like we were talking about earlier.
That hanaʻi value,
And so and there's lots of things that now looking back on it were just these small but huge things that they've kind of done for us, like when we get to go back. And then my siblings, so a lot of it's through the pilina too with the cousins, because it's like me and Hali'a are the same age, and then there's younger, they have younger kids, my other younger cousins, that match up with the triplets, and my younger sister, they're all like the same age. So they, even though it's been a long time now, like 20 years or something, that we've been kind of in each other's lives in this way. And even when our dads maybe weren't as, like, even if they weren't the ones going and seeing each other, we would still get sent back as kids. Or like when we went to exploration, or I didn't get to go to explorations, but my siblings did. They would be the ones who would help us, like, we get to stay with them, or just things like that. And they would do all these things, like, I mean, even, this is kind of embarrassing to talk about, but for an example, like, we didn't know how to pronounce our last name. And so I remember my uncle, like, just with so much aloha, like, would just say our last name, and I remember being like, oh, that's how you say it. Just things like that, like, and taking us to different places and helping us build that pilina with Aina, like, they did a lot of that, like, they were the ones who would, like, take us to the lo'i, or, like, take us to the different heiau or to the local ER and all those things, and just would, I think I'm sure they're doing that in part for their own keiki too, but looking back on it now, I'm like, oh, they were doing that for us so that we would get to experience that stuff. And I think such a lesson in like humility, because it's so hard. I think what I'm realizing too with my own siblings or just in general, it's so hard to approach that stuff without bringing out the shame of like, why don't you already know this? And like, you should already know this. And they, just did such a good job of just modeling like aloha for us and how to teach people and show us about our own culture that we just didn't know about. So
rest assured, all of us are learning that humility.
Okay.
It is definitely something, I think, and what was beautiful of what Anakala Kumalakpaki, what he was teaching you folks too, is that, or teaching, I think what's beautiful of that is reminding all of us, like, again, that's the healing piece for you folks too. And like, instead of us having that, like, oh my gosh, the pointing finger, what is the lesson? What is the ha'awina here? That, so the ha'awina could be a different. So I love that he took the time. And that's what it is, and I think so many people, and again, even for myself, like, I also have to practice this. Because growing up in Hawaii, I still have those moments where I'm like, wait, how come? And I have to, even for myself, I have to stop and be like, hold up. Even for kids in Hawaii, that narrative is actually there too. If you never go Hawaiian immersion school, the likelihood of you like being very immersed in the culture is different. Unless you're in halau or you're in some kind of program, the cultural understanding and Hawaiian cultural values, they don't exist in the Department of Education, which is really sad. I would expect that it should. I would expect that the Department of Education in Hawaii should enforce having cultural values. So that narrative is still over there. But also, this is a perfect reminder, because a lot of our Kanaka on the continent have that shame of like, there's so many Kanaka I've met where like they have a Inoa Hawaiʻi, and I'm like, oh, what is your Inoa Hawaiʻi? And they won't say it because they're so, and I'm like, no, Marys, just say it and I can help you. Like, I don't, but then I realized that they've been shunned before and had that, like, somebody go, oh, like, how come you don't know how to say your own name? Well, let's step back and look at the environment that they're growing up in. Like, I don't think they're going to go to a school here in Oregon where everybody can pronounce the Hawaiian vocabulary in the same way. So it's definitely a thing we need to learn. And our Hawaii people, just a reminder that we too should humble ourselves, because I think we make that mistake too often than we realize. I think I want to say that mistake happens a lot, where we just automatically expect somebody to know when that should never be the case.
Well, and I think it's important too to trace back, like, where does that shame come? Like, what's really the root of that shame? Yeah, that I think it's easy when, through just all the things that have happened to us with, all the things. Like, it's easy to...
Colonization.
Yeah, sorry.
Colonial. Let's name it.
Just name it.
Let's keep naming it.
But yeah, right? Like, that, I think that's something that I kind of have been learning too through our own mo'olelo of our ʻohana and like mo'opua. How I think I thought like, oh, this is just something that we're navigating because of all these things that have happened to us, and we're so. I think there's ways that we keep like separating ourselves from other Hawaiians, and like keep, you know what I mean? Like, oh, this is just unique to us, and like we're just navigating this because of all these things that have happened. When you zoom out and you look at the whole history, it's like, oh yeah, everyone is navigating this shame, and then because everyone's navigating, I think that's where the pointing and turning comes from, of like, oh well, how come you don't know this? Of like, because everyone kind of, there's a way in which, right, we're all just kind of doing that to each other sometimes, that we need to like maybe just name it and like look at the root of it, of like, where is that actually coming from, and it's not ours to carry, like, and then we can kind of set it down and
it's the
have to shoulder that.
It's finding ha'aha'a, the human. I think I think if you approach any situation with ha'a and aloha, it's different. And we're all human. We have to learn how to approach things with ha'a, with humility, and aloha, with compassion. So it's a learned thing. So now you're here in Oregon, and you have a keiki. You have a little one. What do you see that's different now? Like, is there a difference in the environment to which she gets to grow up in? I love having Kaʻula at all the things. So
she loves being here. She always says home when we pull up.
Oh.
I think it's to me it feels totally different, and I think other people in our ʻohana, my grandparents and my parents, and they feel too that it's different. And I think it's just the access is different. Like, it's not. I think when I was pregnant, I had so much anxiety about having a Kanaka kid and being like, I'm navigating all this stuff. How am I supposed to do this? Like, and how am I just bringing her into a situation that she's going to feel the same way I do? And how am I supposed to, as the Mākua, like, go through that? And then that all melted away as soon as she actually was here and I met her, because I was like, oh, she's just as Hawaiian as any other baby. Like, it's not, we don't start out at this or in this way that makes us different from other. That was just like a big realization that I had. So to me, it's really just like the access of, and it's interesting. I think it's really healing, and it's interesting just her getting to come and be in these spaces and build Pilina in a different way than like we got to. Like actually being around other Hawaiians and like having a different level of access to her culture. Because I feel like her and I, especially at first when I was first coming to the KALO events, and still sometimes now, but like her and I would show up, I would be like so nervous, so like all this stuff of like, oh, and then she just like runs in and like is like saying hi to everybody, and it's just like, it's like, oh, like she's not navigating any of that same, and I get it, like, yeah, she's 1 and 2, like maybe that'll be different as she gets older, but just like she's not navigating all those same things that I feel like I have to navigate, or other people in my ʻohana, because she's here, she's surrounded by it, she's able to absorb it in a different way, and it's going to be more normalized for her versus having to like go and find your way back into that. It's a normal thing. It's not, the surroundings is normal for her. Yeah. Beautiful. But I'm so curious too what it's been like for you to raise your keiki over here. It's interesting. Yeah. So my sister, we're 18 years apart. And so she moved here to the continent when she was 2. And that was very interesting because growing up in Hawaii as a baby for her, she was just so surrounded by everything. But then she moved here, and it wasn't until she was like 5 or 6, and then by that point I had moved to Oregon, and then we had halal. So it was very interesting for Celine to grow up here. As just watching her grow up here was very different because she was surrounded by halal. Now, she didn't want dance hula when it first started. She wanted nothing to do with it. And a lot of it had to do with because, like, growing up in the schools, like, little things like spam musubi or, like, certain things that she would get teased about. But she had made a relationship with all of these friends. Like, they went to preschool together. Like, she had built this relationship with all of these kids, and to this day, like, they still live in the same neighborhood. Like, I still see them, right? Like, so for her, it was very different because she grew up very Hawaiian in this space just because she was surrounded by halal. I feel like I see Kaʻula in her. Like, I see, like, this is where Kaʻula will be. What was hard for Celine was after high school, when she went into the real world, like when she went into the world, not being surrounded by the community that she was surrounded by. She had to be surrounded by a different community. That feeling of cultural loss or identity or like just like racism hit her strong, because for all those years she didn't have to navigate that, even with her classmates, right? She had been together with them since she was 2.
So she knew all of them. Whatever color skin they were, whatever ethnicity, they had all grown up together. So it's a very... But she also had the fundamentals and the foundation of halau and Hawaiian culture. It was very evident. Hawaiian language surrounded her, even though she didn't speak it. She knew, like, it was very evident in her life. And then when she went into the corporate world, you know, she was made to feel very brown. And it was the first time she had to navigate that, which is very interesting because now raising my kids here, and some of them were born in Hawaii, and then now we're living here. That's a different narrative because growing up, they had to navigate being brown in school because they didn't get the privilege of having friends from when they were younger. They had to relocate, meet new people, navigate how to be in this culture, basically assimilate, right, to what would make them fit in here. But at the same time, navigate, like, I don't want to fit in here. I still want to be Hawaiian. And that is where halau, for me, was the realization of the need for halau. We needed to have something that was grounded, rooted in Hawaii here. And I think that's what is the missing pieces for a lot of cultural programs that exist here in the Pacific Northwest, is that we're forgetting that piece. Like, we need to be grounded at home. And even if it's hard, like, if we don't have that, those of us who can need to make that platform. The kuleana it belongs to us. Because it's just like voting. If you don't vote, you cannot complain. If you're not doing this work, you cannot complain. And I think so many of us who come from Hawaii, we walk around with this mentality of, like, you just should know, or we're so proud to be from Hawaii. Absolutely, we should be proud to be from Hawaii. But if you're not having these hard conversations, you're missing out on the people who need the support the most. And raising our kids here, I think the hardest part that I see is that I wish we had more Hawaiian influence. I wish, like, Celine grew up very different because she had this pilina to this aina already. But my kids had a pilina with Hawaii, and then that got taken away. And then they had to figure out how to be here. And I always tell myself, I always think, like, if we had Hawaiian immersion schools here, they'd be different. I go to the schools here, and, you know, our values, the way that we grew up in our schools at Hawaiian immersion school is different. There's no room for us to, like, granted, kids gonna be kids, like, they're gonna do the things that they're gonna do. But I think I even though we have this here, I feel like I'm still missing something. I feel like there's a piece here we're still missing on, like, how we can support the kids, like, and it's these conversations. These conversations are being missed because all they ever get to hear is the kupuna stories, which are so important and so valuable. Like, we will never downplay that. But I think our young generation need to hear from the younger generation, telling them, like, it's okay. And this is why, for me, like, I hope that my kids listen to this podcast and hear, like, oh, you know what I mean? They can see, like, everybody's on a different journey. But I can tell you right now, I feel like I feel like we could do more. But then I also see Celine. I see my sister who grew up here, who I feel like that's why I see Kaʻula in her. That's what I see, this, like, this joy, because Celine just had this joy of being around everybody, and it was normal for her. It was normal for her to be around halau. It was normal for, like, it wasn't, you know, it was normal for her to go to school and have that part, and then come home and be Hawaiian. Like, she didn't have to, you know, it's different when, and it's my kids who have to go to school and be Hawaiian, but not be Hawaiian. And then, you know, my heart, for me, the hardest one was seeing Kahoku go to university.
Yeah, what was that like?
That was the hardest for me because she was challenged there that she wasn't Hawaiian enough. That was the one that it was hard to see her have to navigate here and explain to people. Like, she never used her Hawaiian name when she went to the schools here because she didn't want them to misuse her name. And then when she was like, when I go to university, I'm gonna use my Hawaiian name. She's so proud because that's who we know. I don't call her by her government name. We call her Kahoku. And when she went, she was so proud to use her name. And then at that point, her name wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for her because she grew up here. So you weren't really Hawaiian enough. And I'm just like, why is that still the narrative? And I go to conventions and I hear that. And so many of our Hawaiians, you feel like we're taking 10 steps forward. And then for some reason we get into a place where you take 20 steps back. But it was really, it broke her. I mean, it broke her so much. She decided to relocate. She doesn't want to be there anymore because she just is like, why do I need to fight and tell you I'm Hawaiian? Like, I don't understand. Can you just not see me as kahoku? Like, I don't want to tell you what is my percentage? Like, what are we talking about? Yeah. So it's really difficult, especially because she was so grounded and so rooted in who she is as Hawaiian. Yeah. To be made to feel that way, but I think that also helped her understand the Hawaiians here. Yeah. I think that helped her feel like, oh man, like, I do have a kuleana. I am very privileged to be in Halau. And I think other people here are having to deal with this. Like, how do we... And so I think she's still... And they're such a young age, right? They're trying to navigate what that's like. But it was really hard to see, especially as a Hawaiian, Mākua, to have to see your child fight for that. Yeah. That's very infuriating, especially when it's with our own people. That is the part that's hard. But I can tell you that we as adults have to fight that too. So, yeah. And it's very heartbreaking to hear our Hawaiians feel like they're not enough. It is very heartbreaking to hear the shame that our Hawaiians go through. But that's what we're trying to change. Yeah, that's the reason why, and that's why our podcast is called KOKO. To talk about it. It's to talk about, like, and it's not just about the blood of Hawaii. It's also about all the different waters. Everybody that makes Hawaii. So, but it looks like we're going to be
can I say one thing?
Yes, of course. Okay. Yes.
I just want to say that.
I know, over here trying not to cry, sorry.
I know, no, it's okay. I know. Well, I want to say that for me, thank you for sharing that about what she went through. And for me, joining Halau and seeing, like, that OPO group of her and the other people her age, like, I feel so much, I think it just fills me with so much pride and joy just seeing them, like, get to grow up, because I don't know all their stories or, like, how long all of them have been over here and all this stuff, but I feel like they a lot of them have been here for a while, and it just feels so different than how I was at that age or what it was like for me growing up over here, because I wasn't in Halau and I wasn't in that kind of community. And yeah, I just love, it's so meaningful for me just seeing them, and, like, I feel like I learned so much from them, and seeing how you've, like, kind of taken care of them over the years and just, like, created that space for them. And KOKO is actually a big reason why I joined the Halau, because I remember at one of my first, I mean, there's lots of reasons, but one of the first events that I came to at the Mala, and I was so, or maybe it was my second or third event, but I was so nervous and so just worried about, should I even be here? Should I even be, you know what I mean? Like, just all the things. And she was so kind to me and so friendly. And I feel like she could see that I needed someone to kind of extend something. I feel like she was that person who extended the hand for me. And she told me I should join Halau. And I remember she said, you should join Halau. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I haven't danced since I was so little. It's been a really long time. And I remember she said, it'll feel like home.
Oh. Why you gonna make me cry?
So yeah, I just mahalo her and your ʻohana and everything you guys have done, because it's really important, especially for those of us who need someone to extend that hand to us. And
Ew, I cannot believe I'm crying over here like this. Jeez. Mahalo for that. But I have to say it's the community. It is all the people. I wish it was just a vision. And I think we're very blessed with the community that we have, with the people that we get to surround ourselves with. I think it's the village. Mm-hmm. It's the village that raised them, and she's definitely that. That's the star. Mm-hmm. She's definitely that light. So it's definitely the village that raised all of them. But it's the community that we have, and the reason why we get to be. I think we get to have the mo'olelo that we share. So, yeah, thank you. Oh my gosh. As you get older, they just keep falling down. Yeah, sorry.
I get it.
Okay. But mahalo for being with us today. Mahalo for sharing your story. I feel like we're going to have another podcast with either Dad or the whole family. That would be a great coverage. I think more people need to hear your story. But mahalo for joining us today. Mahalo for being with us. Again, mahalo for visiting KOKO Podcast here at Kalo. And we hope to see you at the next one.